Welcome to this week's edition of the impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. It's me, Tony B. Yes, once again, we are here to tell you about the impact of the coronavirus, and we're going to be talking in a little bit with Tila Coombs, who's from Bird Bar Place. He is the Energy Assistance Program Coordinator, and we're going to tell you how you can get energy assistance along with everything that's going on this year that you're dealing with. Now the weather is turning colder, your heat bill is going to go up, and there's an opportunity for you to get assistance with that. Again, we know that these are extraordinary times here in the Pacific Northwest. We're having surges, in particular in South King County. The positive cases went from 4.4, I think, to 7 point something, almost double. So we knew this was potentially going to happen. The science, the doctors were telling us that as the weather got colder, more people would be inside, and this contagion would spread more widely, a little faster, and we see that happening. So we're just asking everybody to do their due diligence and make sure that you're safe. Not turning this into any type of political football at all. But there are some things that you can do. Now, having said that, we understand, it's been hard. And this is a time of year when folks get together. And so just everyone remember to be safe, whatever you do. Our next guest, speaking of this time of the year, Rainier Avenue Radio would be broadcasting playoffs for high school football. And that's not happening this year. My guest joining me is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Athletic Association, Mr. Mick Hoffman. Mick, how are you doing?
Doing fine, considering. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here, Tony.
And and thank you for coming on and giving us these updates. There are parents who are concerned and students who are concerned, and I actually got a couple of calls from athletic directors who are, hey, can you get Mick back on the phone? And so we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do know this. The last time we talked, we were going into this. Now we know that some students have not been engaged in activities in athletics. We know that some coaches who would be coaching right now, not coaching. We know that there are referees who would be reffing games right now are not reffing or refereeing, whichever. I think it's refereeing.
Yep. Ref and refereeing. Sure.
And those are just a few of the obvious impacts. Well, let's start with this, Mick. I'm going to give a little bit of background information on you, and then maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the WIAA, and for folks who may not be familiar with who you are and what you do, we can share a little bit about that. But as far as Mick is the executive director since 2019. And what a way for you to start. I remember seeing you in Yakima when at the I think it was the 2A and 1A basketball championships, and that was probably about the last weekend that we had. And who would have thought we would be here today? But anyway, prior to this, you served as the assistant superintendent for Vancouver Public Schools before taking over as the assistant superintendent. You served as the district athletic director for VPH, Vancouver Public Schools, from 2007 to 2015, and as the athletic director, you developed the Summer Coaches Institute, a continuing education opportunity where coaches throughout the district in Southwest Washington had the opportunity to learn from medical and industry professionals. Tell us a little bit about the WIAA. For those who may not be familiar, just kind of give us the background on who the WIAA is and what you do.
Sure. We're a nonprofit that has authorization through RCW to basically govern high school and middle school activities. And so we do sports, but we also do activities, forensics, thespian, solo ensemble. So it's a diverse. We are a true activities organization. Our main job is to govern. We started in 1905, and essentially, from what I've been able to read on the history of it, as I was gearing up to interview for the job, we had schools playing each other in different communities, and the adults were jumping into the games, and they said, "This isn't fair. We need rules." So, we haven't quite solved that. We still have issues where people think people are cheating, whether it's transferring, recruiting, extra years, whatever. But we definitely keep the adults out of the game. It's a kid's game, and so, essentially our job is to provide the opportunity, and we're blessed to be able to be in a memory making business. And so our job isn't to make money. Our job is to create enough revenue to put on events that kids will remember for their entire lifetime.
Now, is there a WIAA, a version of that in every state?
Yep, there's 51 total with Washington, D.C. They vary greatly. Some only do high school, some only do sports. Some are only public schools. So it does vary around the state, I've learned, or around the country. We're definitely one of the most inclusive organizations of a state organization.
Now, we're going to get specifically into some of the impacts of the coronavirus. But again, before we do that, do you communicate? Do y'all connect? Do all 51 of you have Zoom conferences, I guess it would be now? Are there some states in particular that you connect with where you share information about how you're dealing with this and what's taking place in the other states across the country?
Yeah, we do. Matter of fact, we're under the umbrella of the National Federation of High Schools, and there are 8 sections throughout the country. We happen to be in Section 8. So I meet on a regular basis by Zoom with 11 other Western states, everybody from California to Alaska, Hawaii, Montana, Utah. And so within our group, it's very different, where there's 4 of us not playing at all, and 8 of us who are playing to different degrees. And so we've been able to, talk and get best practice, steal ideas, and now begin to advocate in partnership with each other for greater opportunity. So, and then at the national level, they get us together about every 5 or 6 weeks to do check-ins, but they do send out regular updates, and we can request information as necessary.
And again, before we get specifically into what's going on here, how helpful has that been? Are states experiencing the same things? Is it varying from state to state? What's kind of the prognosis on that?
Yeah, very different. Even if you just look at our borders, from what Idaho is allowed to do, they're planning to start winter sports as scheduled this week. Their board is struggling with that decision, but they've chosen to move forward. Where Oregon actually has more conservative metrics to meet than we do, and that continues down the coast to California, Nevada, and Hawaii. Are states that are not playing, and the others are playing and competing in all sports. They did go into a pause in Utah recently for winter sports, but they're planning on starting up sometime at the end of the month.
Is there another state that I would say is similar to Washington, where y'all can, more closely say, this is how we're aligned, this is how we're going on, and that's been beneficial to you in deciding how to move forward, whether that's in government mandated regulations or just student size, student body size, or anything that is familiar to what's going on here?
Well, similar to what we're seeing in other aspects of governing during the COVID, California, Oregon, and Washington governors have a pact, or they appear to work very closely together. So we see very similar type of guidelines and directives coming from our governments. And so honestly, it's helped to have the diversity of the different states to understand and see what works and what doesn't work. Because the last thing we want to do is recommend something or advocate for something that's going to be harmful to our students. And so, but we're able to see there's a lot of different laboratories in play around the country, experimenting with different provisions for play.
Well, here we go, Mick. In the state of Washington, let's take a look at the overall landscape. Where have there been activities? And I know this is a multi-pronged question. Where have there been activities? And what have those activities been? And how's it been going across the state? We'll start with that.
Great question. So just so people understand, the way the decisions are made on who can play and who can't play come directly out of Olympia. So basically, the governor and Department of Health, they create the framework that we all operate under. Our schools, in our school sports, they then get recommendations and guidance from their risk management groups, who both of the major risk management groups have stated they're always going to recommend what the governor and Department of Health suggest. On the other side, community sports clubs and teams and that previous to November, they were under different guidelines. They had more leniency. So early on, we saw throughout the summer and the early fall that a lot of club teams in youth sports were allowed to play, and we were not. Ironically, the WIAA offered a season starting September 7th, and no schools took advantage of it. And the reason was the governor made a recommendation in August not to have any extracurricular activities in schools if, in fact, you weren't in-person learning. So that limited the option. In November, the governor reviewed those guidelines, right? So again, he's been very, very good and consistent on saying he's going to follow the science and the data. And they put school sports under the same guidelines as community sports.
Okay.
So now what a club team can do or a community-based team, a boys and girls club, is the same as what the WIAA can do. And so with the shutdown notice we got on Sunday, we all had to shut down indoors. What we have seen happen and what we're basing our advocacy on, for example, is youth soccer played throughout the summer. And they charted how many kids, I think I want to say it was about 1,900, what kind of activity they did and what type of transmissions they had. And they had 0 documented transmissions student to student. What they did have were they had a handful, and I'd have to look at the study. I've dealt with so many in the last few weeks. I want to say it was definitely it was either 19 or 9 positive cases, all contact traced to exposure at home. And so we studied what they did. We studied what USA Volleyball was able to do with club. We're working with our basketball groups around the state that we're able to make connections with to find out how they ran their club sports, AAU, what have you, to see what they did, how it worked. And so we can implement those in our plan. So when we're given permission by the governor's office and the Department of Health to play, we're fully prepared to do it safely.
Mick, have you been in touch with the coaches? Can you just kind of tell us the overall mood and feeling about this? Is the time of year where people have, it's something that they look forward to, something that they love to do, and it's more than just the activity of athletics, and that's important too. But there's also the mentoring that takes place, and during these times of isolation. Again, we also know that the impact that's having on mental health. What's going on with the coaches? Are you in touch with them, and what's the feeling? What's the mood?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a sense of loss in a way for coaches. Now, previous to us getting permission from the state to allow open coaching, so we essentially, up until Sunday, well, this Tuesday, we were able to have kids come in and work with coaches in small groups of 6, and they loved it. I got a video from one of our high schools. Their high school, their community, their school wasn't ready to do it immediately. Once they gave the opportunity, they did it for 2 weeks, and the video of each one of these young ladies of just the appreciation of being able to be around, not necessarily with physically connected, but just in the gym with their teammates or out running on the track. They loved it, and coaches really loved it. And so when we got put in the shutdown, which we understand the spike, hey, we got to bend this curve. This thing is blowing up right now. So we understand why that's being done. We just want to make sure when this thing is bent, we're ready to play. We put out a message yesterday. I don't know if you saw it or not, Tony. Op-ed with a 2-minute video that's on our WIAA Live app or our website, WIAA.com. That was with my name on it. It was a staff effort doing exactly what you said, asking the Olympia to factor in the mental health and social emotional factors as they're creating the guidelines for us. I just opened an email about an hour and a half ago from a mother in Olympia whose 14-year-old son's friend committed suicide recently. I get those periodically. Our kids are hurting. The University of Wisconsin did a study back in the fall and showed that depression and anxiety, as reported by students, was up 40%. nearly 50% for students, worse for females than males for whatever reason, but significantly increased. We are hearing from our schools that F rates are up 30, 40, 50%. And not only are they up that much, but students have multiple Fs rather than single Fs. So we understand our students are hurting, both
By
emotionally
by
and
F, you mean a fail.
a fail. Yes. And so, our role is to help keep students connected to their education, right? So this isn't just about playing games. It's about helping kids stay engaged with their education, because that's the long term. But we can create some memories, and education is going to take them anywhere they want to go. And so we hear from the coaches and ADs, we hear from the parents and the kids. The last thing we want to do is delay and stall. We understand we have to wait till we bend this curve, but what we're asking for is in the decision framework to allow more opportunity as it can be done safely, and to be prepared to act on that once this curve is bent, and not start the conversation at that point.
And Mick, again, are you in touch with the referees who again look forward to this time of the year, who again institute some of those rules that need to happen on the court? This is obviously something where they're not there, and this is a loss for them. And folks may not. Maybe when you go to the games, you think about, oh, I want to yell at that referee, but you're glad they're there. And these people who
Yeah.
take their time to go through the training to participate in this, they're not active either.
Yeah, we are communicating. I mean, we are really trying to communicate, and we don't always meet that mark. But Todd Stordahl, he ran a survey of his officials early in this process, and about 30% said they would not officiate until a vaccine was out. Average age is just over 55 years old. So there's a lot of vulnerable adults in that group, and we understand it. But 70%, even back then when we had very little understanding of this virus, were willing to work. We anticipate that being higher as we edge towards starting to play. And what we have done with Todd and his group is, as we lay out our schedules, we involve them in the conversation. He has said, hey, we will find a way to make it work. We've told our ADs, when and if we get to start playing, you have to work with your local assigners. We need to make sure, if you need to move games, hey, we might not play on our traditional nights. We might not play in our traditional order. We have to work with the officials, because without them, we don't have a game.
Mick, I'm not trying to drag you into a political conversation, but from where you sit, you're probably hearing a number of different points of view in the way that people feel about this. How are you navigating that political minefield?
Yeah, we're really trying to put students first, right? And I think any politics oversee that. It's how you get there. And so I will say this about Governor Inslee, whether people support him or not, our death rates and our transmission rates in the state of Washington are definitely in the lowest quartile in the country. So we fully understand his efforts have put us to where we're safer rather than more at risk. That being said, we are also asking, as part of that process, that with the Department of Health, to factor in the social emotional, and let's make sure that we find the sweet spot in this. Where is the sweet spot in physical health, social emotional, and opportunity, that we're not so conservative that we miss out on opportunities? We missed out on opportunity in the fall. We understand why. We didn't know enough about the virus, but there's enough medical and science data and information out there now that we can change where we were at then to be able to do this safely. And we've definitely learned from these other states that have played. We've had 40 other states play sports this fall, and we are stealing their best practice and implementing that into ours. So the way we stay out of it is, hey, we're going to recognize the good work of anybody, whether a politician, an AD, or somebody who serves our community like you do, Tony. And when we have questions, we're going to ask the questions. And at the end of the day, the truth's the truth. And we're not going to get into red or blue, R's or D's. That doesn't matter to us. Ours is, what can we do to support our students, keep them connected to their education? And at the end of the day, that's where we're at. And my experience with working with the Department of Health and the governor's office is that's their same focus. It's just a matter of philosophy on risk threshold and what is prudent.
Mick, I mentioned that this time of the year we'd be in the playoffs and we'd be broadcasting high school football. And so, I don't know if this puts you on the hot seat, but you are the guy that people would want to hear from in this. And I'm just going to make this a very simple question for folks who are wondering out there right now. What happens what's happening with football. Now we have another mandate. Again, we don't have to get into how big football is for a number of reasons. But what's happening with football?
Great question. So our schedule, the board just changed our schedule to a February 1st start date for season 2. Football's in season 3 starting mid-February. I'm very confident we're going to play. One is if we bend this curve, it gives us the opportunity. Football is considered high risk right now by the state, but it's also outdoors. The other piece is the state of Michigan played football this year wearing masks. So they either wore the gaiters, a cloth mask, a fabric mask. There's shields that the companies have put out there that our sports medicine advisory, the doctors have approved as a safety item. So they had very little transmission. NFL just came out with a study. And again, it's the NFL on the NFL. So again, we're going to assume that they're acting with integrity in their science, but that it's not being transmitted student to student, even in football, partly from being outdoors, partly from safety precautions. That being said, so I'm confident we're going to be able to play football this spring. And we know it's important. It's a community sport. The other thing about football that a lot of people don't understand is any student can participate. Gender, size, athletic ability. There's a place on the football field for everybody. And so it's one of the most inclusive sports we have, even though it's a violent sport, a collision sport, it's inclusive. So I am confident we're going to be able to play this year.
Now, how do you communicate this information, or do you, to the athletic directors, to the coaches, to the parents, to the students? Maybe that student that's a senior this year that hasn't had a chance to play and is not connected. He's not, one of the youth that the coaches would be normally talking to. The parents may not know. Is there a mechanism for this? And I understand we're in isolation, and you probably weren't set up to be able to do this. How is that working?
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you, we have a great communication team. We're a really small staff, 12 people total, serving over 800 schools. But Casey Johnson and Andy Knapp are wizards with communication. So the best piece of communication for us is our app. It's free. You can download it. It's WIAA Live. And oh my gosh, I think I might have just messed it up. Casey's going to have me. But our app. And so we put out a communication on a regular basis. We call it the 2-minute drill. So if you go on our website, you can find them, WIAA.com, and then WIAA Live is our app. And we put those out, and anybody can subscribe to that app. The other piece is that we do a bi-weekly meeting in partnership with our State Athletic Directors Association, where we get on and usually have a guest speaker, somebody come in and do some professional development, and then we'll give a WIAA update. So we've tried to be really intentional on providing updates in a multitude of ways. With the press release we put out yesterday, I got this morning that there were 167,000 impressions on our, what was it, on the Twitter, and then we had another 50-some thousand on Facebook. And so our communications team did actually set us up for success. We like using it to highlight students. Unfortunately, we're doing it mostly to talk COVID right now.
All right, and I'll just put this out there, Mick. I think that's a great effort, but that's people finding you. There are people who don't have time to find you, and how do you get to them? I mean, that's people who say they take the initiative to do that, to download, but that's not everybody, and people are pretty busy these days. Are you doing anything to reach out specifically beyond the app?
Yeah, so one is we tried to make all ourselves available for opportunities like this whenever possible. We put out the written one yesterday, and I tell you what, Tony, I'm open. You're outstanding at what you do. We are open to ideas because our goal is that when we put a message out, it goes to everybody. We don't have anything we're going to hide. We're going to share our information. So we would be open to how do we get to that. One of our goals moving forward, and maybe at some point you and I can talk, is to have a parent advisory group or a parent communication group throughout the state. And how do we network that in? So what I've done this year is I've had a lot of parents reach out to me, especially on email. And I don't necessarily respond to them all. Some of them are pretty one-sided opinions, but I'm saving names because one of the things I'm going to do once we get this settled and we start to put together that network is to ask them to be part of the solution. And again, like I said, we don't have all the answers, but we're sure willing to talk about possible solutions.
Well, Mick, we appreciate our relationship with the WIAA, and you can count me in. We'll help figure this out. I got to ask you about basketball before we go. What's going
Yep.
on with basketball?
Okay, so basketball is another one that's considered high risk. We are working again to get permission from the state that, it's not ideal, but if we played with masks, would that be considered low or moderate risk? Because that puts us at a different metric level we need to meet to be able to play. Currently, basketball's charted to start February 1st. If for some reason we're not able to play February 1st, we're fully prepared to move sports as necessary. So we have basketball and wrestling stacked up on February 1st. The other sports are lower and moderate risk. So we have a high probability of playing those. These will depend on if we can get some movement in the classification of them and or what goes on with the pandemic. So we might have to move them to later in the year, or we might be able to play with modified rules such as wearing a mask or a gaiter or something. Again, not ideal, but I think I had one parent tell me, my student's ready to play in a hazmat suit if that's what it takes. So we want kids playing. So we're going to find any way to do that that would be considered safe by our medical people.
And February 1st, is that the first day of practice, or is that when games are scheduled to start?
Yeah, first day of practice. We had to in order to keep all sports as an option for students, we've now shrunk our seasons to 7 weeks. So there's essentially a week of pre-practice, 5 weeks of competition, 1 week of postseason. That could look a lot of different ways. It's really going to be up to local control in your area. We're working with Pat McCarthy in the Seattle schools, the Kinko League, the Metro League, to say, hey, how do you want to run your events? And they're working on those things right now and have been for several months. We're going to give a lot of local control to that, depending on the priority of a specific sport or activity and the nuances such as number of teams, the geography, the pandemic, and the virus transmission rate at that time. So February 1st, the start of practice, 7 weeks will culminate.
All right. Hey, Mick, thanks for joining us again and sharing all of this valuable information. A tough job. I know you weren't expected. Kids want to be active. Kids want to play. It's a difficult balance. Any final words you want to share before we leave this conversation?
No, appreciate the opportunity. The person who probably has the toughest job anywhere is the superintendent. Because when you talk about politics, they're directly in the middle of that in their communities. They have strong voices on either side. And we realize in some places they're going to be prepared and able to offer sports because they're going to have the building structure, the HVAC systems, and the will of the community to want to play. In other places, they don't. And so our job is to provide opportunity, do it safely. We're advocating now in the midst of a huge spike with the understanding we know we have to take this pause now, but as soon as we're capable and able to play, let's get kids out there playing.
All right.
And they get one shot at it.
And I'm just going to assume, I could be wrong here. You know what happens when you assume that these are probably no attendance games.
Yeah, right now it's actually each uniform participant could bring one fan. We're pushing for 2, so at least 2 parents would be able to attend, whatever that looks like in their household. But at this point, by rule, they are allowed to have 1 ticket per player.
Well, we're here and we're ready to broadcast and give folks an opportunity to watch these games if necessary. My guest again, Mick Hoffman. Mick, thanks for joining us. We're going to be back and we'll be talking to Tila Coombs for Seattle Energy Assistance Program so that you can find out how during these times, if, hey, things are happening, you need some assistance on your heat, we got you. Coming up next. Rainier Avenue Radio.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
A new HIV prevention technique has proven remarkably effective at protecting women against the virus. According to NPR, a single injection of a drug called cabotegravir, taken every 2 months, was so successful in preventing HIV in a clinical trial among women in sub-Saharan Africa that the study was wrapped up ahead of schedule. The study, run by HIV Prevention Trials Network, was looking at 2 forms of pre-exposure to prophylaxis or PrEP aimed at women. PrEP is a technique of administering low doses of anti-AIDS drugs to people who are HIV negative as a way to protect them from the infection. The study compared the effectiveness of the new long-acting injectable against the current form of PrEP, a daily pill of Truvada. Dr. Anthony Fauci said, quote, "This is a major, major advance. This is a really good day for biomedical research," unquote.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Phil-Am Radio, servicing the Filipino and Filipino Americans all over the world. Phil-Am Radio, streaming live in the internet every Tuesday from 1 o'clock to 2:30 p.m. Seattle, USA time. We are your host, Kuya Bert Kawili, Emma Heron, and
Manny Panganiban.
Phil-Am Radio.
The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, empowering communities and changing lives. The Urban League has been there to serve when our community is at its lowest. It's never mattered what the crisis was. The systemic oppression remains constant for those most vulnerable. Here at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we'll be temporarily adjusting our hours of operation and available services. If you are in need of resources, we recommend that you give us a call at 206-461-3792. To make an appointment, press 0 and speak with the receptionist. Walk-in hours will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And hey, we'll gladly work with you via phone as best as we can if you're exhibiting any signs of illness to assist you with information to save your home, find you a place to sleep, or connect you to job opportunities. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle.